Hello. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to everybody, or good afternoon, I guess, to some of you. I'm over here on the West Coast in Phoenix, so it's still morning for me. But welcome to today's February edition of our monthly ongoing series, our Ready Chat series. This stands for Wrangham's guiding principles here of empathy drives innovation. So that's what the Ready stands for, Wrangham Empathy Drives Innovation. I am Evan Mackey here with Wrangham, along with my co-host Larry Worth, who I will introduce later, but he'll be your moderator for today. He'll take it over shortly. And for those of you who are new to us, don't know anything about Wrangham, we are a technology and talent management firm. We are committed to accelerating meaningful employment for everyone. We use consultative services, educational series, and do full cycle staffing for all programs involved with autism or neurodiversity and disability. So we host these Ready Chats as our way to try to bring empathy to collaboration with our partners and our clients. And we've been hosting these for a few years now. We've fostered conversations in all kinds of subjects, but our goal is to drive sustainable workforce solutions. So we're going to continue that today in February's with our theme of hiring in the age of disruption, future-proofing inclusion. As we all know, of course, this is a time of rapid change. We're seeing a lot going on out there in the world. So we're making this not just a priority, but we believe that this is essential for everything that we're building out there to create a resilient and future-ready workforce. With that being said, to help us navigate the conversation we're going to host today, we have scoured our networks for who we think are the most appropriate industry leaders that have dedicated their very careers, if I don't say their lives as well, to this very topic. So I'm going to start off. We've got Lisa Morris. Probably everybody here that's on the call knows her, but if you don't, she is the vice president for integrated marketing. I don't know exactly what integrated marketing does, but maybe she'll talk to us a little bit about that. Policy, strategic engagement, and she's at the National Minority Supplier Development Council, as we know and love it, the NMSDC. Lisa spent well over 35 years in the technology industry, working across startups. She's been at small businesses and even major corporations like IBM, where she was VP. She's a dedicated advocate for women and minority-owned businesses. She's been featured in many, many things, among those U.S. Black and Hispanic Engineer magazines. She's got tremendous amounts of honors and recognitions. We don't have time to get into all of them because she's just so well-rounded. But she also happens to find the time to be an author and a speaker. So Lisa, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Brian Pena, he's a globally recognized workforce strategist. He is the CEO of Defiant Solutions, and many of you know him from his time when he was at SIA, Staffing Industry Analysts. He is the SVP there. And if you guys do go to the annual SIA conference, you'll see him in the back rooms playing poker, taking everybody's money. He's got over, we've decided to say, a couple decades of leadership and workforce transformation.
Thank you very much.
Yes. He's an expert in technological innovation, global expansion. He's helping industry leaders out there navigating change by challenging conventional paradigms. He builds inclusive, high-impact workforce solutions, and he's just a well-rounded, wonderful human being. So welcome, Brian. Thank you for being generous in your time for us.
Great to have me. Great to be here. Thank you so much.
It is great to have you, but you're right. And then we've got the jet lagged Ajit Dadani, always looking fresh though. He's probably the most fresh jet lag person I've ever seen. Ajit is a Forbes Coaches Council member. He is an empathy strategist, and he is the founder of Empathify You, which is where I first came to learn about him. I was very fortunate enough to sit in on some of his sessions. He's got over 20 years, also a couple of decades, as a C-suite executive leading finance and business divisions. He's been known as the CFO who speaks empathy and KPIs in the same sentence. And through Empathify You and his teams, he helps corporations, he helps nonprofits. He's even playing around in the educational space worldwide to harness empathy as a superpower and teach leaders that empathy is a strategic catalyst for sustainable growth. So, Ajit, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for the introduction.
So we've got three wonderful panelists here who've been tremendously generous with their time. I'm going to turn it over to Larry Worth. He is Rangam's EVP of Global Solutions. He's got a tremendously extensive background, also working with nonprofits and government agencies and universities as well. He collaborates with our partners globally, developing our inclusive cultures, creating pathways for employment for all talent. So Larry, let's get started.
Absolutely. And what an amazing opportunity to join everybody here and everybody who's on our call. And all of you have such wonderful bios. It's always a little humbling and weird for someone to sit there and talk to you about like that, where you're sitting there and you gotta sit there and smile, right? And then you get through these three amazing people, and then there's Larry. So, but that, hey, that
They're
is
the
what it
guest
is.
of honor, though, Larry.
I know, and you all have amazing hair, and I don't, but whatever. We're going to get through it. We're going to be all right. So the way I like to do these and moderate is really to make it more of a conversation than a Q&A. We find it to be, more engaging. And I really, whenever I speak and such, I really want to make sure that those who join us leave with some little morsel of goodness, little, something extra, a little something that they leave and say, hey, this has been a really great experience. So as we continue to go through here, our goal is to provide you all with those little nuggets of wonderfulness, I guess, little bits of wisdom. So, our topic here, hiring in the age of disruption. We're going to talk probably a little bit more than just hiring, but really what we're going to focus on is future-proofing inclusion. And we all know the value of inclusion in the workplace. We know that companies want employees and their partner base to reflect the customers and communities that they serve. However, we are in a time of some economic pressure and some increased scrutiny around inclusion and DEI. And we're starting to see companies that adjust, amend, and in some cases abandon, in other cases move right on forward. Those are conversations, and how we got here and where we are today. Those are conversations that we're not going to talk about today. We're going to leave those to our favorite water cooler or personal Facebook posts or like awkward family dinners, whatever. We're going to put that aside. All right. And instead, we're going to talk about, we are here where we are. And, let's move forward. And how do we move forward? And when we move forward, let's move forward and see this as an opportunity to really take inclusion and have it be part of what we do. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We should have enough time. We're going to try to, bucket it into three different points. One, we're going to talk about a little bit about where we are today and a baseline to move forward. Next steps and how to embed, like what are the next steps to move from here? And then lastly, how do we actually, future-proof inclusion and what is necessary to make it just what we do. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, panelists, again, for your time, your expertise, and you guys have been sitting there so patiently, and I know you're on the edge of the seat, just wanting to jump right in there. I'm shocked that Brian and G, it's been 11 minutes, and all you said is thank you. So we're going to give you a time to talk. We're going to start with Lisa, and so you are with M&S DC, and so I'm sure your member companies are just blowing you up right now with all kinds of questions and wanting to talk. So what are some of the biggest challenges or concerns that you're hearing from some of your members about how they're approaching inclusion now?
Well, thank you. And I'm really happy to be here, Larry. I want to preface my comments today with the fact that NMSDC is mostly focused on the supplier diversity side of things. So most of what I'll share today will be from that point of view. Obviously, we're in some very unprecedented times with DEI facing legal and political challenges. And so some companies are hesitant to advance inclusion efforts for fear of legal risk or public scrutiny. Corporations tend to be very risk averse. And so the challenge is, reframing supplier diversity as a business strategy or a business imperative rather than just a DEI initiative. I mean, DEI has become like a bad word these days. But at NMSDC, we emphasize that inclusive supply chains drive innovation, competitiveness, and economic growth, making them essential to long-term success. So what we're finding is companies are asking, well, how do we make the business case for supplier diversity, particularly in today's climate? And the key is really data-driven storytelling, showing how a diverse supply chain increases resilience, enhances agility, and open new market opportunities. And so what we're doing at NMSDC is we're trying to help organizations quantify the economic impact of supplier diversity to secure executive buy-in. With the pushback, some companies are retreating from public DEI commitments, but quietly maintaining supplier diversity programs. And so the challenge is ensuring that these efforts don't just survive, but continue to evolve. And this means embedding inclusion into procurement strategies, so it becomes an operational norm, not just an initiative tied to political cycles.
Absolutely, I agree.
So
I love
true.
that. Love that. And you're right. When we talk about inclusion, it's more than just the hiring side of it, right? It's everything, including all of those wonderful suppliers out there that are, working with those companies to increase their business. So
Larry, could I add something here?
Sure. Jump right in, please. Yeah, jump in. Absolutely.
I just came back and I heard one of our clients in the entertainment space, this division in the entertainment space just got a serious funding round. And I tell you why they got it. Now watch this. They were struggling to break into a certain market, trying to serve a certain market. But they had a complete different group trying to market to this specific group that is, a minority in this country. Over the last year, they were trying to do it themselves. Okay, we can bring this product to this market. Failed. Over the last year, they've invited people. Those were not diversity hires. They were hired because they had to reach a new market. They reached the market because they hired the right people on their team. So it wasn't a diversity hire. It was a tactical, just like what Lisa said, business strategic hire that now, literally got the email as soon as I landed that they get this huge round of funding. So yeah, Lisa, spot on. There's a clear business case for it.
I think that's such a great example, Ajit, because in many instances, I think companies feel like they're just checking the box.
Mm-hmm.
They want to get a spend number and they look at lagging indicators as opposed to really understanding the business justifications about why they do things.
Yeah.
And I think DEI, diversity, all these other buzzwords, oftentimes it's something that companies feel they have to do, and it's not really part of something they've really committed to doing. And so what I'm really, really intrigued by, and Lisa, I was really excited about your comments about a data-driven approach, because so much of the things that we use and the metrics that we apply to looking at supplier diversity are static, spend-related, not dynamic metrics. And so what I'm really, really intrigued about are stories like Ajit shared, where the inclusion of diverse cultural perspectives is able to improve business outcomes. You look at things like the $1 Billion Roundtable, you look at other organizations, and they all track spend, and that's all fantastic. But really understanding the role of diverse perspectives and aligning those with business outcomes, that I think is what's going to define success. DEI and this sort of pejorative that we've talked about, this evolving space, I think that it's kind of lost sight of why we're doing this and why organizations do it. And it's kind of whipsawing to really focusing on what the true purpose of inclusion is, which is providing opportunity for groups that heretofore have not had it, right? Or in any dimension. And that's no longer just tied to, race or gender, but really about people who really do need assistance. And one of the reasons why I'm not going to do this, they're not paying me to do this, but we look at organizations like Wrangham, they're committed to making sure they provide opportunity for people who are disabled or differently abled and veterans. That to me is the fundamental purpose of what diversity and inclusion should be about, as opposed to other metrics, which maybe there's a shareholder who has a diverse background. I think really tying it to business outcomes and understanding the purpose of these things that tie to the cultural perspective of the organization, that's really how we future-proof inclusion, is to move beyond just simply checking a box and issuing a press release and focusing on improving outcomes for groups that need that are often overlooked. How's that?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Lisa. Jump on in there.
I was just going to say absolutely. And so we are really just beating the drum on the economic impact, because people get so emotional about, the words, right? And as you say, people think, oh, DEI, black and brown people. I mean, unfortunately, that's what people equate it to. And a diverse, whether it's diverse workforce or diverse supply chain, think of it as diversity in all aspects, diversity of thought, right? So it's gotten really muddled. And I don't think people, have really thought about diversity and what it really means. And it's not a handout. Supplier diversity is not, a handout. It is not a set aside. It is leveling the playing field so that all types of people and companies have the opportunity to compete to get into the supply chain of corporations. They still have to win. So they have to come in and they have to compete. It's not a, oh, we're going to give this to you because you're a woman or you're, Asian or you're Hispanic. It's just an opportunity to compete. And I don't think people understand that. It is not a handout.
And so that is a great point. Absolutely. Go, Rob.
I just want to say something real quick because I want to amplify that. I'm so sorry I get excited about this stuff. And so, Jean, I'm trying to match your energy. So, but one of the things I think, Lisa, that's super, super important, and I really am curious about how the NMSD is seeing this moving forward, is how they define success and how, in many ways, I can speak from personal experience about suppliers who have felt their key differentiator was primarily they were owned by a person of color or a woman or what have you, and not necessarily understanding that they need to be really, really good at delivering and being efficient and productive businesses as well. And I think that when we think about this notion of future-proofing, I really like what you said. It's not a handout. It's not supposed to be something where you're making it easier for one group over another, but certainly recognizing that you have to hold them to the same standard of delivery. And oh, by the way, this is all, they align with our societal, community, and operational goals around inclusion and opportunity. So I just want to amplify that. I think that's an important thing to point out, that sometimes suppliers do miss that point.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think about us, right? We happen to be one of the best learning and development companies in the world that happens to be owned by an Asian Indian background, right? Because when I'll just give an example. We did an A/B for a client. We had to win that client. We won that client because we increased manager effectiveness by 25 points versus our competitor increased the manager effectiveness by 12 points. Now watch this. They were a big consulting company, but we won because we're just, and I say this because that's how, what NMSDC stands for, is we just happen to be good. We just that we don't have to go to a golf club, because I was told, you want to grow your business, go to a golf club and suck it up to get business. And I'm like, not going to work, So I'm just got to say
that. That's awesome. Well, first of all, this is the greatest gig ever. You just ask one question and just let everybody go. This is great. I want to make sure that we continue that. You got to be good at what you do. And I worked at a lot of companies, and not a single one of them created inclusion over putting a box for someone to check, right? I mean, it really is about the people. It really is about the company's stance on this and how we're going to move forward and just what to do, right? And how to do it. So I think these are great points. And as we continue to move on, through the rest of this, continue to, let's keep doing this. Let's keep jumping in there. And so, we talk about what it is and what it needs to be, like where we are now. What's the next step? So we're talking about, we're here now. We want to get to future proofing, but what's that first initial step? What can we be doing? That can kind of move us in that direction. And So, Brian, I know you do a lot of work. We all kind of do a lot of work with companies, but I know that you do a lot of work with these companies, and especially on growth strategies and different types of strategies. Where to begin to change the narrative of like what we were talking about, like what Lisa said of, it's not a handout. It's really this. Like, where do we start to change that narrative so companies really see this more as, operational imperative than just the feel good initiative?
So I think that two things. One is you have to remember the goal of the corporations are not necessarily to advance societal goals. Goals of corporations are by definition, we can thank the Dodge versus Ford. There's a whole story about this. Companies exist to maximize shareholder value, right? That's why they're there. There are purpose-driven companies, but at the end of the day, their obligations are to increase shareholder value. So the things that what I think we really need to evolve to is develop metrics and measurements outside of static sort of KPIs around like spend management or supplier penetration, supplier count, and dig deeper into those numbers to determine how do we define a successful supplier relationship or a candidate hire. Holding to the same standard, but also recognizing that sometimes some of these providers and candidates may need additional levels of support. Maybe it's different sort of mentorships. Companies that are successful, they have mentor suppliers, or they address payment terms, or they look at different contracting terms, or maybe they have to understand the level 2, tier 2 supply base. Kind of digging a little deeper than just that top line spend, revenue, and ownership. But then also really to your perspective, to Ajit's example, which I think was just phenomenal, understanding how diverse perspectives can improve business outcomes and focusing on that, okay? Focusing on the ways in which a diverse and inclusive culture aligns with your organizational goals and delivers improved business outcomes. That's the only way that this is going to be successful, and really the way it should be. If it's just something that societally we all have to make sure that we have the right sort of flag outside, or we're contributing to these particular groups, that's just, pardon my expression, but virtue signaling. And really moving beyond that and understanding that disadvantaged groups also doesn't include people who are Black or brown, but people who are differently able or veterans or coming from economic hub zones and things like that, and expanding those things and recognizing that they need to align with your organizational culture and operational goals. And that to me is really, really key. And I think that while we are seeing a lot of negative attention to DEI, it's a great time to really reconsider and refocus on what the purpose of these initiatives are, which is increasing the size of the pie for everyone and making sure that we all don't have to go to the golf club to be successful.
Wow.
That's wonderful. So I agree. And so Ajit, since Brian kind of referenced there, you want to jump in that, or do you have additional thoughts that can go on that? I can ask you a question if you want, but I'm pretty sure you might want to jump in on that one.
I want to stay on Brian's topic that he brought up. Think about it, right? Most of us for decades lived in silos. Our communities were around us. Today, our workforce, Chandra is on the call from India. People are around the world. We work in a global workplace. And if we don't understand this, like I was in a country across the world this last month, traveling around the world, and one of the fastest growing technology firms out there has deliberately hired folks from across different countries. So the experience becomes more user-friendly and more comfortable. So to Brian's point, I mean, we have to be aware. Now, we were not taught this skill. Brian, Lisa, Evan, Larry, were we taught empathy in school systems? No, nobody was taught empathy. Let's think, for a time, we didn't need it because all our co-workers looked like us, came from the same community. Today, we need this creation of belonging that Brian's talking about, inclusion and belonging, because if I'm working with somebody, Ramadan is starting this Saturday. If you don't understand that culture and you don't know how to work with people from different backgrounds, you will lose talent. The best talent walks away from your organization or underperforms because we're not doing the right thing of including them. making them feel like they belong.
Yeah,
Sorry.
most companies, their consumer base is diverse. It's not homogeneous. And
Right.
so their supply chain should be reflective of that. Their workforce should be reflective of that. I mean, to me, it's just kind of common sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a world of globalization, and we have been for a while. You're not just selling to, the 2 mile radius where you live. I mean, you are potentially touching all walks of life. And so, again, companies are representative of those customers that they support. So, very, very, important for us to understand that is we're not just hiring for the sake of hiring or wanting to hire someone who's diverse. It really is truly because that's who we sell to, who we represent, who we buy from.
The thing I always kind of default to and is we're not taught empathy, right? And I think that's such a good point. We're not taught empathy, but at the same time, we all kind of know how we like to be treated and how we like to treat other people. And so empathy, I always kind of joke with clients and friends and prospects about how a lot of HR coursework is often can be distilled down to just don't be a jerk, right? And I think institutionally you have to be aware of what that looks like for different cultures. Like the Ramadan example is a great one, because if you don't understand how that works, and you could easily offend somebody, and 67% of Gen Z hires will not work with non-inclusive companies. That's actually a metric that says if I'm not going to work for a company that doesn't demonstrate inclusive values. But at the same time, I think I like to replace empathy with a word in my mind, the most powerful word in the universe, which is curiosity. And I think that in my mind, every single great thought, idea, achievement has come from a curious perspective. I think I can do that better, or we can improve that. And if we recognize that that's got to be foundational, the way that we run our organizations and our businesses, and the way that we look at every single person that's in front of us with that sort of curiosity, that in and of itself is much more accessible. Because oftentimes empathy feels very touchy-feely. In my mind, I think it's incredibly valuable to be considerate of other people's perspectives and feel it personally. But I think it's also important to be equally curious and approach that with curiosity. It's impossible to also be down on yourself when you're truly curious. I think it's a more important way to be. And that means like asking questions and not being afraid to ask questions and not being afraid to recognize that you don't know things, or I don't know. I honestly must admit, I don't know a whole lot about how to interact with somebody during Ramadan. I have to admit, I acknowledge that. And I'd love to learn more. But I think that as organizations, we need to have curiosity bound in, tying to what's important to the business, and being willing to be wrong from time to time, and also being forgiving of organizations that struggle.
Absolutely. So, sticking on empathy just a little bit longer now, Ajit, what are some of the? We know it's so valuable, and it is that it is empathy, but it's also having that curiosity of thought that kind of drive that. What's a small little way that we can start with that, or build more inclusive place through that empathy, through that curiosity.
Okay, so let's get some attention here. Let's first of all, what if there was a skill that gave your business an 85% advantage on your top line revenue? Would you train your team with that skill? Give me a thumbs up if you would.
Absolutely.
Ernst and Young, not Ajit in his background. Ernst and Young did a research, 85% higher revenue in companies that learn empathy. But remember one thing, we can't have too much empathy. Here's the best statement an empathy strategist can make for you. We can have too much empathy. When empathy is not bound with accountability, we are weak leaders. And I say this because sometimes we can have too much empathy. And I want to recognize that. That's why I'm an empathy strategist, like a little ninja in there, And I say this because here's what I want you to pay close attention to. the type of, so let's define the empathy. This is not the emotional empathy where I just feel what you feel. It's compassionate empathy, which requires action on my understanding. How we define it at Empathify You is, here, look, watch this. Self-awareness. What do I have? What do I not know? What do I understand? Curiosity, Brian, exactly what you said. Who am I? Do I really know who I am? Do I know my limitations? So that's self-awareness. Stakeholder understanding. Do I really understand my customers, my employees? Do I really understand them? And then the third part of an empathy strategy is strategic action, an action driven to a business outcome. And I say this because if we can learn this, again, I can go Deloitte, Ernst & Young, and get all the research behind this, that I can show most people, just Brian, you said, like most people need, shareholder value must increase. If your engagement scores, a company's engagement scores, employee is at 60%, that means that CEO is spending $10 million on employee expenses, but only getting a return on $6 million. I will fire that CEO. They need to learn how to increase that. Now, how do you increase impact and empathy? For example, we are tactically, as an empathy strategist, tactically focused on manager effectiveness, because manager effectiveness increases employee experience. Employee experience leads to a higher customer experience, which leads to revenue. Oh my God, revenue, shareholder value. Oh, dang it. People pay attention. People shut up and listen when we tell them that you're leaving money on the table. And dear CEO, if you're not including this as a strategic strategy in your organization, I'm sorry, you're fired. And I say this very strongly because we're doing good. We're doing 10 million. I just recently had this conversation. A conversation with a client that recently we helped them acquire a new business, not because it was just a strategic move. It was a clear understanding of who we were acquiring, like they were acquiring. I was just part as a fractional as part of the team. And I say this because that's what we're after. We need to strategically understand that all these managers live in little silos. You could have a great CEO. Brian, Lisa, you're great CEOs, but all these little leaders, managers sitting in there with no empathy, destroying our teams. So let's realize that they're coming in with their agendas. And if they don't learn this skill, now it's not something that you're born with that gives you burden. The type of empathy that most people talk about is that burdening empathy. I'm talking about an empowering empathy that helps us increase manager effectiveness, EX, CX, and bottom line revenue. How's that for an answer, Larry? You feel the energy after lack of sleep?
I mean, good Lord, good Lord.
And I think that was great, Ajit. The one thing I really like was that your reference was empathy aligned with accountability. I think accountability is critical for all levels of the organization. And how do you? And this is the question. I'd love to hear your perspective on how do you define that accountability at all relevant levels in an organization? That must be that's always been challenging to quantify.
Oh, are you ready for the jugular?
I'm ready for it.
Okay. So the first accountability, and this is, most people say that our companies operate with our values. That's the biggest, can I say BS? Oh, I said it, Larry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You're encouraged to.
That is the biggest lie we've been told. Most companies and most managers lead with what are called 8 shadow values. And I was just around the world talking to individuals, and the shadow value of control and attention is what destroys innovation in organizations. Destroys. So when you talk about accountability, we've got to hold ourselves accountable. That how are we showing up? I have these 8 shadow values on my shoulders. Am I being really aware of which shadow value is showing up? That's why I'm not listening to somebody junior than me. I was across the country in another country, and I literally told the manager, I said, you guys have the best ideas in your team, but because you have such a controlling environment, your best people are not speaking up. So that is the kind of, first, we have to hold ourselves accountable. Then obviously having accountability within the team and all that stuff is another whole conversation around that. For me, it's always about me, Brian. I want to give agency to me. I want to give agency to the leader, that if I want to change my organization, if I change, everybody changes.
Yes.
Absolutely. So you can see why we picked who we picked to come and join us, right? We definitely very passionate, which is great. And I love it. And I love it. And Lisa, you're probably going, what the hell did I just get myself into here? But with these guys, but no, but I mean, look, this is what's needed, right? I mean, we need more with this type of passion. We need more because that's what it's going to take, right? It's going to take breaking through the systemic barriers that are in front of us, so we can make just inclusion what happens, and we talk about it's not a feel good thing. There really is a strong, sound business case for that, and Lisa, you were the first to mention this on here about that business case, and particularly in supply diversity, we can talk all about bringing in the talent and hiring the talent and making sure that we have people that are representative of those that we serve and support. But it's more than that. This is an ecosystem of, company is an ecosystem of everything, including all of those different vendors. And Ranga being a minority woman disability owned company, we talk about that all the time about the difference that we bring to the supplier base. And we know that supply diversity brings and drives financial and operational and strategic advantages, and it gives companies the opportunity to be agile, flexible, outside of the normal larger relationships that they have with other companies. So I wanted to touch back on the statement you said about that business case, and if you wouldn't mind, Lisa, if you could talk a little more specifically about what are some of those very tangible business strategies. It's not just it's a feel good, the right thing to do. Give me some hard data if you got it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'll sound like a broken record, but business diversity, including contract with diverse suppliers, is simply good business. Equity and inclusion programs, first of all, they are legal. They are not illegal, despite all the hoopla. They are not illegal today. But they're beneficial to the bottom line. Diverse suppliers drive cost savings for corporations. According to an analysis by McKinsey & Company, diverse suppliers offer their corporate partners year-over-year cost savings of 8.5%, considerably more than the 3 to 7% annual procurement savings that most organizations realize. Supplier diversity improves procurement ROI. The Hackett Group did a study, and they found that companies with strong supplier diversity programs had 133% higher return on procurement investments than those without such programs. Supplier diversity programs drive growth. According to the Corporate Diversity Index, an increase in awareness of a brand's supplier diversity program of just 1% will lead to an additional 800,000 U.S. consumers using the brand's products and services. And then supplier diversity creates competitive advantage. By actively engaging with diverse suppliers, private sector companies can gain a competitive edge. Supplier diversity programs can attract innovative and qualified suppliers who bring fresh perspectives, fresh ideas, and solutions to the table. So this can lead to enhanced product quality, improved customer satisfaction, and increased market share. So again, what we're doing at NMSDC is really focusing on the outcomes and impact versus the processes. In other words, it's less about what we call these efforts and more about the outcomes we're trying to achieve, which is greater opportunity for the businesses and communities who've traditionally, lacked access to our economic system. So again, it's just good business sense, and the numbers don't lie.
Yeah,
absolutely. So,
can I say something really quickly? I'm so sorry. I know that I think Brian saying something quickly is probably a misnomer, right? I think that's rare. But I'm always try and approach things with a skeptical eye. And one of the things that I think is always a danger when we're looking at these initiatives is the question of causation versus correlation. And when we look at some of the static metrics that we have around success and savings, I've been in procurement 25 years, run at least 500, 600 different initiatives over the course of my career. And I often look at things that talk about those correlations to savings and try to understand the root cause behind them. No one's going to argue that having a diverse supply chain is beneficial. And no one's going to argue that a well-run program incorporates diverse perspectives, diverse suppliers. But often I think if we want to really, really be future-proofing of inclusion, we have to look at these metrics with a skeptical eye, because people who don't believe, these conversations are not for people who are already enrolled, it's for people who aren't. And so we have to recognize that if we're going to be encouraging people to engage with diverse suppliers in an authentic way, we should really be kind of questioning some of the metrics that these larger firms are putting out and making it much more applicable to the individual and the person and the opportunity. I think that any of these conversations should also be aligned with institutional goals and hard metrics and performance, but also just reinforcing what the right thing to do for organizations and for society as a whole. And there is definitely shareholder value in approaching these, no question. The metrics don't lie. Consumers are going to be much more inclined to work with companies who do have diverse and who are committed to really societal goals. It's a common fact. But I want to kind of just push back on some of the traditional metrics that we look at, because there's tons of things where they say, like, for example, every dollar spent on a diverse supply chain yields 2.61% back, or 42% of suppliers, companies have more efficient supply chains with diverse suppliers. But when you cross-reference that across non-diverse suppliers, oftentimes the metrics tell a less optimistic story. So if we want to really, really go about and stand for advancing inclusion and opportunity, we also have to look at ourselves and say, what are the true metrics that we're trying to get to? And how can we make a case that stands up to correlation versus, or causation versus correlation perspectives? And what I'd love to kind of see is more of a deep dive into how those things apply. Just a number that aligns with something is less impactful to companies that we're trying to convince to do this. These conversations are not for us to re-amplify. We're all committed here. I'm trying to say, as I'm trying to talk to a skeptical buyer or hiring manager or company, I want to use metrics that they can then not question. And so I think there's a real opportunity here to kind of dig beyond the metrics and beyond the numbers and think about a more holistic form of engagement, where we're able to focus on what are the ways in which this supplier is bringing a good outcome, and how these suppliers are able to expand my market, or how do they make a real business outcome better, save money, improve efficiency, increase revenue. Those things I think are really, really important. And so I just want to caution, and I also want to kind of say, this is the question that I certainly am interested in exploring, is what are the ways in which diverse perspectives, diverse suppliers cause these things to happen, not just happen. Because one could argue that companies that tend to be more focused on diversity look at that as like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're making money already. So if they're already making money, they're more inclined to look at some of these solutions. So I think it's just more of a call to action for those of us who are interested in this, that we need to start thinking about these things a little differently.
Love that. Could I add something here real quick? So Lisa, to your point and adding to Brian's point. So we just renewed a 30-year contract with a global banking system, right? And so now I'm close enough to the offices there and everything. I'm like, so why did we get this here? And they go, my team actually said we like to have somebody who's they have today now a large representation of folks that are from across different diverse cultural backgrounds. And when a brown man shows up and doesn't talk engineering or math, or is not teaching any of those traditional courses, when I show up and talk empathy, first of all, they get shocked. Then on top of that, I'm talking about making sure you create neuro-inclusive environments, making sure you get a therapist for yourself. Brian, Lisa, you should see the shock on these people when a brown man tells them that I have a therapist. That's the kind of examples that people need right now, because our workforce is diverse. So if the face on the screen is not like them, they're like, this applies to them, but not to me. But when somebody like them is telling them that, look, I was a CFO, I was a jerk of a leader, I had to unlearn some stuff. And then this is what I did. This is the journey I went on. They see themselves on the screen. They see themselves in the person teaching, and that's how change happens. If that organization, I have lots of numbers to share, but that's an example of how when we show up, we have to have diverse teachers up on screens, but the representation matters today more than ever, because if I'm a new person, I'm hearing somebody that's culturally completely different than me, I'm like, oh, that's great. It applies for you. But, in our culture, this doesn't work. We're just efficiency. Just to give you an idea, back in where my ancestry is Indian, efficiency, empathic adaptability was not taught. But they had to learn now in order to grow. And that's, anyways, it's like fashion.
Well, and I think it's important. The storytelling is so important. Corporations that do a great job of having a diverse supply chain and are seeing a lot of success, the more those stories can be shared of how this vendor, who, if I wasn't focused, on supplier diversity, I would have never found them or knew they even existed, right? Because remember what I said, it's not a handout. It's giving companies an opportunity to compete who may not have ever had the opportunity before. And so the more those stories can be told and shared, I think, it's not one thing. It's not just the metrics. It's all of these things. Look, we all have unconscious biases. That's a whole nother conversation, right? We all do. I mean, and so I think, and I'm going to say this, as a Black woman, right? I think in general, people are drawn to people who kind of look like them, right? I mean, it's just kind of natural. It's human nature. And so if you're not exposed to people who may look different or speak differently or whatever, then you don't know what you don't know. And so that's the whole beauty of all of this, is ensuring that these, companies or future employers that may not have had the opportunity to ever get in the door just have the opportunity to compete. Not a handout, compete. And so I used to say, I spent 22 years at IBM, right out of college, climbing the corporate ladder, did very well, became a vice president in a time, I'm really dating myself, but at a time when there were very few African-American women at that level. And I used to always say, and I tell my daughters this today, being a woman and being a minority, help me get a seat at the table. I better know what the hell I'm talking about when I get there so I can stay. And that is the whole idea of supplier diversity. Not a handout, but just an opportunity to compete, because if there's not a focus on it, they may never get noticed. The one thing we hear all the time from corporations is, oh, well, I can't find the minority, I can't find them. What do you mean you can't find them? There's lots of them. Okay, here they are. So it's that opportunity to compete. And then people are oftentimes very pleasantly surprised when they compete, they win, and the results, are phenomenal. And so the more those kinds of stories can be shared, I think it's an education process. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
No. Jump on right up there with everybody else. This is like no problem there. It's all good. It's all good. And so, a few minutes left here. So, you said, you got to get the opportunity. You got to. What other like systemic barriers are there that we need to get through? Like what's holding us back, right? We anyone who listens is like, wow, this is we all should be doing this. It should be just what we do, but we're not doing that right now, right? And so how do we go from right now to there? What is it that's kind of stopping us from do that, and how do we address that? Anyone want to take it? I didn't direct it at anybody. I just kind of let it open. I mean, Lord knows the three of you, you jump right in there. But seriously, what's holding us back? Why, if it's so amazing as we say it is, we know it's the right thing to do, and we've got stories and stats and all the other crap. Like, why aren't we doing it? What's holding us back?
Larry, if I may, it's always been 50-50. When I show up in any organization, 20% love me, 20% hate me. The 60% in between are deciding what should we do here. And then I always tell them, listen, you may not like me right now. And the folks that get us, they're like, okay, we get it. We must understand empathy as a tactical skill. So we have better meetings, we have better ideas, we have more innovation and all that stuff. But 20%, they just don't want me. All I tell them is, hey, if you listen to me, I'll help you buy a new yacht. And in my head, I'm saying, in that process, I'll help you become a better person. So I'll tell you a story. We're doing this deployment for a senior leader, 20,000 persons. So we started off with the senior leadership in this case. And for 8 months, the CEO had warned me, this is the guy that doesn't like you. He doesn't know why we're doing this stuff. For 8 months, he didn't turn the camera on once. He didn't say a word. Now, can you imagine Brian, Lisa, Evan, Larry? So we are on the last but one workshop, and suddenly his camera comes on, and we're all scared, like, oh God, what's about to happen? And he leans forward and he says, I just want you guys to know, these are some of the best trainings we've invested in. They changed my relationship with you and all these guys here, but it changed my relationship with my daughter. Listen to this very carefully. We took him through this neuro-inclusion because part of our whole workshops, part of it is the neuro-inclusion work that Rangam and us have in common, the work that we do. And he had never understood that his own daughter was neurodiverse. And then after that, guess what he did? He'd show up at every cohort. Right now, we're on the 4th year of them. Every cohort, he's like, hey, and he's got a great, I just want to let you know, I didn't like these guys. I want to let you know, shut up and listen to them. And he'll go out there and he speaks with passion because in the end, it helped him personally. So people move in this direction. Either they're getting personal financial gain, public recognition, or personal gain. In his case, it was the fact that his understanding neuro-inclusion helped him understand his daughter, increase the relationship. Suddenly he became a fan of this work that went beyond just the workplace. So, it's because people don't know. They don't understand that there's a world that you can be kind and succeed financially, both. They don't understand. They think it's an or. It's an or. I think it's additive. My word for the year is additive. Instead of, I'm going to be this or this. No, it's additive. What can I add as a skill? And if we can go with that mindset, we win as a community and as a society.
I think it's awesome.
I wrote that down. That's awesome.
I think when I think about why we're not doing it or what that looks like, I think we have to recognize that despite our best intentions and what we all say, diversity and DEI and inclusion is in many ways been expressed over the last several years as also excluding other groups, right? I think it's probably a controversial take, but I think that, there are people in the country, for example, the 45-year-old white guy who got laid off, and that creates animus, and that the implementation of a lot of these things has excluded large parts of the population. And I say this to somebody who's owned a diverse business for 5 years, but I think that we have to recognize that my favorite word, zeitgeist of the time, is been expressed or experienced as exclusion to other people. And so when we're heading into this next stage of whatever business looks like in our broader economy, I think we have to recognize that we need to cast a wide net, and that there are people who, good, bad, or indifferent, have been excluded from the conversation. And any initiative needs to be able to have empathy that there are those valid perspectives of people who want to just compete and work like everybody else. And I think that the way that we do that is through storytelling of applicable and accessible stories, recognizing that the empathetic experience is not just limited to people who look like me. And part of having that understanding of that will allow these things to be super successful moving forward, because at the end of the day, everybody wants the same thing, right? There's a great quote, I think it was by Kennedy. He talked about how we all love our children. We all want what's best for our communities, and we all occupy this same small blue earth, right? And I think that we just kind of recognize that shared humanity, but that also means that we have to recognize that there are people who don't fit into the diversity bucket that feel excluded from the constant conversation. So anything we do to advance inclusion should be focusing on that recognition and looking at those groups that do satisfy an organizational goals and compliance. Like, for example, when we look at things like disabled unemployment, right? The labor force participation for disabled people is through the roof, right? It's double, 7% unemployment rate, which is double the stated employment rate. And a lot of times they're excluded from these conversations entirely. And so I think that we need to recognize that diversity and inclusion is about opportunity for everybody, not just people of color like us.
Love that.
That's a great point. And I agree. I think the reason why these initiatives, programs, focus, whatever you want to call them, came about in the first place is because the people who look like me or like you were excluded. So I think what's happened is it's, one could say, well, did we go too far? So we put the focus, and now other groups, particularly white men, right, feel like, now they're excluded. And so I think that's why now the focus is on inclusion, to make sure that, nobody's excluded, right? That everybody has that opportunity to, be at the table to compete. But yeah, I mean, if you think about why it came about in the first place, is because there were groups of people who were excluded from having the opportunity. So once you put the focus on it, now you can say, fast forward to where we are now, one could argue, oh, did it go too far? Where now you have a group that feels like they've been excluded from everything. So
I think that's such a critical point to have that opportunity, just have that ability to be at the table, to have that opportunity. You still got to win it. You still got to be good enough, but just that opportunity. And that is what we want to make sure is just what happens, right? And that's the whole part of having this conversation is to get to the point to where all these amazing things that we've talked about today just happens. Just have the opportunity. You have you can be put in a position to prove that you can do it, or prove that your company can meet the need of that vendor or what have you. So I think that is important thing to take away from that. And I love all the conversations that we've had and all the points and the little if someone wasn't able to write down something, they weren't listening. Like, they had us on in the background, they weren't listening, they were watching TV, because my Lord, I wrote down like 6-7 things, and I'm supposed to be moderating this, right? So, I like ending with, give us one last thing. And I know that we've given us a lot of things, but I mean, Evan, do we still got a minute, or do we gotta like, we're good?
We can do whatever we want. It's fine.
I threw out the script a long time ago, so let's just do it. Look, one last opportunity. Someone who haven't wrote down anything yet on what to take away from this. What did they need to be taking away from this? So, Brian, you start, buddy.
Oh, I'm going to do my best to be pithy and not ramble on. I kind of had touched upon this earlier. I think that the most powerful force in the universe is curiosity, and recognize that no matter what it is, there's always human progress is predicated on trying to figure out that we want to do this thing better. I can do that better, and focusing on that we can do better overall. And that definition of what better is, be curious about that. Recognize that there are real concrete benefits to including diverse perspectives. Recognize that is not limited to certain outward appearances in terms of that, and really cast a wide net. And also look at your organization itself, what culturally aligns with their objectives. Maybe it's LGBTQ, maybe it's veterans affairs, maybe it's opportunity zones. Understand that the way to create an inclusive workforce is casting the widest net possible for as many people, and understanding how you're creating barriers to those folks. Challenge assumptions, be curious, and be fearless. There you go.
It's awesome. Thank you. Lisa?
I want to see inclusion become an unquestioned business norm, where it's just the norm, where diverse suppliers or a diverse workforce, they're competing, they're thriving, where corporations recognize that economic inclusion is a core driver of innovation and resilience, and where supplier diversity is seen as a competitive advantage rather than just a program or compliance exercise. I mean, ultimately, the future of business has to be built on an inclusive economy for inclusive economic growth. And so I'm just hoping that we can one day get to the point where we don't even have to have these conversations because it's just the norm.
Beautifully
Absolutely.
said. Beautifully. If I
Legit,
could
bring us
augment-
home, man.
Yeah, the word we started off with was sustainable. And a sustainable high performance culture has a foundation of trust. There's a big difference between a fad word that creates a high performance. Oh, you throw this, you throw AI in there, you throw this in there. You can throw anything into the mix. Guess what? Even when AI came out and all this energy around it, there's one thing very clear in a sustainable high performance culture is that you have to have trusting teams. And when people, and a foundation and a cornerstone, HBR research cornerstone of trust is this word called empathy, an understanding of yourself and the understanding of people. And for me, if I could ask everybody to lean into yourself, what drives you? And do you really understand the people that you're serving? And finally, I'll leave with this. Do you have a vision that includes humanity plus business outcomes? Or is it just purely business outcomes? Because that will last only that short. But if it includes the betterment of humanity plus a business outcome, that's when you thrive. So thank you, Larry, for having us here. We appreciate you and Evan and everybody at Rangam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you all for letting me throw some stuff your way and gain all your knowledge and expertise. I loved it. This was so much fun, and I'm sure everybody who's chiming in and watching in now or in the future, because we're gonna put this up recorded, and so you can send all your friends here and watch. But I mean, what an amazing opportunity to share, and thank you all so much for your perspectives and your guidance and your thoughts and your passion and everything that make you guys the beautiful, wonderful people that you are. And I just want to say, on behalf of me and Rangam and everyone, thank you so much for this, because this is a difficult conversation. This is hard. It's and people want to dance around it, and you guys didn't dance. You guys went in there right after it, and that's the way we need to do sometimes. We can all move around it, but sometimes you just got to hit it head on. And so thank you for your candor and your honesty and your bravery for take it, stand in front of that Mack truck, because it's coming at all of us, right? And so thank you all so much for all that you do and all that you are, and being the various starch and outspoken advocates and leaders in this space. So thank you all for your time, and man, what a great session. Gosh, I've been thinking about this for a while now. So thank you all so much.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
That is it. Join us next month for March's session. We look forward to seeing you all back here again in another month.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.